So when you're recording him as it like now you're in producer engineer mode, you're recording him. Are there any particular mics he prefers having his guitars recorded with? Like what is his approach technically in the studio?
Yes, very good question. Very good question. I'd forgotten that.
Hmm.
So I've got a very good answer for that because people will want to know this because this is different. So what he would do is he if we were doing a solo, say, he'd do a few solos like most people would, like he'd do one solo, do it again, do it again. Then what he'd do is he'd tell me to put all three solos up or all four solos up, and I think, blimey, that's different. So he'd play them all, and then what he would do is he'd design a solo. He'd design a solo made up of the three or four or five solos.
Hmm.
And sometimes that was hard to follow. And sometimes I'd think to ask him a lot of questions, but then I found it was better not to ask questions, just to try and do what he's saying, and it'll all turn out hopefully all right in the end. So it might, because I've done that. I've done use many guitarists where you choose bits of their solos, but it was sometimes when someone else is trying to tell you what to do, it's not quite so easy. But basically, he designed the solo in that way. So there'd be two notes from that one note from that one. There might even be a part where there were two solos playing at the same time.
Hmm.
That's what I mean. It was quite complicated and hard to follow. And there'd probably be times when I was thinking, this is going to be awful. This isn't going to work. But then we finish it, we play it back, and I think, bloody hell, that's bloody good. That's a bloody good solo. And actually, when I listen now to Zeppelin tracks, and I hear a solo, I can hear sort of how it's been made up. That it wasn't always a live solo. That's a producer. That's a producer guitarist producing his own guitar solos. Also, he used to use I don't know about mics. That was pretty much left to me. But that's also another good question because I'm remembering back now. And the whole time I worked with Jimmy, we used an AC30 dialed up to number 12, I would say. It was definitely more than 10. And it was an AC30, and it was a particularly great one, and it would be definitely almost flat out. And then he very rarely used the Les Paul in the studio, if ever. It would be the Fender Telecaster.
Hmm.
And that combination was a massive sound. He'd also use his string bender, Fender string bender, a lot, which that might have been a Telecaster. I'm not quite sure. Do you know the string bender
Yeah.
guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, and if you don't know about that guitar, that's actually a bit of a, it gives his solos a lot of personality because you hear all this bendy stuff, which you imagine he might have done with his finger, but he does it with it's kind of like a country. Normally it would be for country sounds, I guess, but with it wound up to 10, it worked for rock, absolutely. But so sound wise, yeah, I don't know what mic. I probably was sticking 87, I'm sure, on his AC30, and it was a blasting sound. Yeah, it's a great sound. Great sound. And actually, I'm going to say it as well because I often say this, but I haven't said it for a long time. Is that my favorite thing that Jimmy would do is his rhythm playing.
Hmm.
He got this phenomenal way of like hitting the chord right at the last millisecond, on the downbeat, so that it's going, and it just gives it more power that way. It's not like in front of the beat or way behind it. It's just as it's coming up. And when he was playing because I never got to work with him with John Bonham, but when I put Dave Mattox, I don't know if you know the drummer Dave Mattox,
Mm-hmm.
but brilliant drummer, and him and Jimmy, because Jimmy seems to work off of the drums, not the bass or not. There's not many other people in Led Zeppelin, was there? But or the vocal, it was definitely him and Bonham, So they set up this great rhythm and drums. And I watched Jimmy doing that with Dave Mattox, and it was great because he is a great rhythm player. I that's one of the things that maybe even people don't realize, But for me in the studio, his rhythm playing was very, very good.
When you were working with Jimmy Page, is there anything that he ever did in the studio that really surprised you? Like, wow, that's an interesting way of approaching this, or I never thought a guitarist would do that. Like, was there any one thing that stuck out to you?
Everything surprised me because I'd never worked with anyone like that. I've got a very good answer for that.
Okay.
Perfect answer. Right. So we're sitting there, we're doing Death Wish 2, and we're using this guitar synth. I mean, that was surprising. And then, of course, one guitar synth wasn't enough. So he had like the guy at Roland bring down two of these pedal boards. And basically the guitar synth, you could make it do all sorts of weird stuff like going up and down, like swooping up the note and swooping down. And Jimmy would be tapping away on all these things, And then he had another one brought in, so it was surprising he did stand up through all that and not fall over. But then we were in there one day, and someone said, his guitar tech suddenly said, "What about the theremin on this?" And I'd never heard of a theremin. And I'm thinking, what the hell is a theremin? So then suddenly someone comes in with this big cardboard box with aerials sticking out of it. And I'm sure there was like straw coming out of it as well. And I thought they were having a joke on me. I thought this was for my benefit. And they start setting this thing up. And I'm just thinking, I think I've seen everything now. This is, what the hell is this? Anyway, so they set up this, people who know the theremin, they set up this aerial, and then it's connected to an Echoplex tape. And then he's doing all that business with the all that business. And I'd never heard of a theremin. I mean, I've checked it out. I checked it out after that and found out it's a 19th century instrument, and one of the earliest electronic instruments. Talk about surprising. Yeah, that was. But you see, that's the thing. I mean, Jimmy was full of surprises. He's that sort of a guy, and that's the way he sort of conducted himself. I mean, the whole fact he put, Zeppelin was a surprise, wasn't it? If you were around, you're too young. but when Zeppelin arrived, it was like, what is that? It was like, I mean, all right, there were a lot of bands around at the time that were sort of similar, but they were a phenomenon without a doubt. I mean, they were like brilliant musicians, not many of them. I mean, talking about a three-piece, really. You're talking about bass, drums, and guitar, one bass, and drums. Making this amazing sound. Great musicians, and they also followed their own. They followed their own way, didn't they? Didn't put out singles. They wouldn't do this. We don't do that. We don't do this. They're very much like designed. They designed themselves. So and that's the background that Jimmy came from. And like you say, he's considered one of the greatest guitarists of all time. And that's not bad. And actually, what I always say now, I often say, and I think very lucky that this happened this way, because I work with Led Zeppelin, and I'm very proud of that, is because a lot of young bands, you say to them, and they could be 15 or 16 or 18, and you say, "Who's your favorite band?" They say, "Led Zeppelin." I said, "But Led Zeppelin disbanded 40 years ago. Isn't there anything a little bit later on?" And they go, "No, Led Zeppelin, that was it, and that's Led Zeppelin." Unfortunately, then you listen to their music and it's nothing like Led Zeppelin, because I'm always looking out for another Led Zeppelin.
When you're working with Jimmy in studio on tape, how many takes do you guys do typically? And like, do you often double the takes afterwards? Like, what was that aspect of it like?
It's two different things, really. So first of all, you said, how many takes would you do?
Yeah.
Well, if I was working with Gus, it could be hundreds. Gus being Elton John's producer. Used to do many, many takes with the rhythm section in the studio. We might do 20 different takes of the same song. And then what he would do is cut between them, cut all the best takes together, even only to make up a 4-minute track song. So, but when you're talking about, that's the difference between some pop productions and a rock band, because a rock band would tend to not want to do that. A rock band like Jimmy, like with Zeppelin, I'm sure, or with The Firm, is that you go out there and you do a great take and you go, "That's the one." basically they'd go out there and they'd get a good groove, and then they go, how was that? And I'd go, bloody brilliant, come in and hear it. And they go, you're right. And that's it. And as I say, even to the extent when you're talking about double track vocals, Paul Rodgers didn't even want to do the song again. He didn't want to sing the song again, let alone double track it. That's it. It's finished. So basically what you're talking about there is a band trying to reproduce what they might do live on stage in the studio. And that's quite a different thing to the way pop records are made now, or even rock records are made now, where you're layering and layering and layering, and you're using Pro Tools and you're copying and pasting and all this sort of stuff. It's very, very different. And basically, you can end up with amazing results, absolutely. And some might say you end up with better results. But then if you go back to some of the 70s music and 80s music, which wasn't done that way, and you go, wow, that's better, And then if you describe how it was recorded, which was just 4 or 5 people playing live in the studio and an engineer recording it, you go, wow, they're geniuses, compared to today. Unfortunately, without getting too depressed about it, musicians today, very difficult. It's not often you come across amazing drummers like John Bonham, incredible singers like Paul Rodgers, and amazing producer, guitarist like Jimmy Page. You talk about Jimmy Page, who was playing guitar when he was about 8, and only wanted to be a great guitarist, not being the biggest band in the world. He probably had no idea about that. He just wanted to be a great guitarist and be playing live, And so he made it his thing to be that person. And the same with Paul Rodgers as far as singing was concerned. Not to be the greatest songwriter in the world, not to be in the biggest band. He just wanted to be able to sing the best. And that's what I say to a lot of youngsters, and hopefully some that are watching, is that, try not to be everything. And it's not actually very possible to be everything in music, but try and be the best at even just one thing is sometimes definitely good enough. That's unfortunately what a lot of youngsters, they want to be the singer, the guitarist, the bass player, the producer, the engineer, the writer, the this, that, and the other, Unfortunately, not so many records are done these days in teams of people, and the best teams of people being bands. That's where the best music was made, within, with a lot of heartache a lot of the time, a lot of screaming and shouting and pulling and pushing and this, that, and the other, but out of it came some great music.